It happened in seconds. One sound that shattered a room and sent a nation spiraling into disbelief. A single gunshot. A flash of confusion. And then, amidst the chaos, something far more shocking, a cheer. A man, standing in a panicked crowd, raised his arms and shouted USA, while others screamed, ducked, and prayed. That moment, caught on countless phones, spread across social media before emergency crews even arrived. The footage didn't just show a shooting, it revealed something darker about us all. Before we go deeper, take a moment to subscribe so you don't miss the unfolding developments in this investigation. The video is short, barely 8 seconds long, but its impact was immediate. Millions watched, replayed, and argued over what they saw. The man cheering, later identified as David, became the face of outrage. Some called him heartless. Others said he was misunderstood. But one thing was clear. His reaction broke the internet's sense of normal. How could anyone cheer at a moment of violence? As the footage went viral, it ignited a national conversation about empathy, morality, and the dangerous power of perception. Within hours, theories flooded in. Was David celebrating the attack? Was he part of something bigger? Or was it a human reaction gone horribly wrong? When David finally spoke, the world expected remorse. What came instead was a calm, prepared explanation. He claimed he wasn't celebrating at all, that his chant of USA was a split-second decision meant to distract the crowd, not to glorify violence. According to him, the atmosphere had grown chaotic and tense. People were screaming, and fear was spreading. His instinct, he said, was to project strength to keep people from stampeding in panic. On paper, it sounded logical, but to many who had seen the footage, it didn't feel believable. His body language, his timing, his tone, none of it matched his story. How could a patriotic chant, shouted seconds after a man was shot, be seen as anything other than mockery? Skepticism grew. Analysts dissected every frame of the video, pointing out inconsistencies between David's words and his visible emotion. Viewers debated whether fear or thrill shaped his reaction. Psychologists weighed in, explaining that in moments of trauma, the brain can short-circuit, causing unexpected responses. Yet the public wasn't satisfied. The explanation felt too clean, too rehearsed. And it revealed something troubling. People no longer trust confessions. Every statement is now seen as strategy, every apology as performance. David's defense, intended or not, became a mirror reflecting how society now questions every motive, every emotion, even in crisis. But this wasn't just about one man's reaction. The chaos that day exposed something deeper, a nation divided not only by politics but by basic humanity. In an age where loyalty to ideology often outweighs compassion, people no longer respond to tragedy as human beings first. Every event becomes a political test. Are you on my side or theirs? That's why this shooting, and the reaction to it, struck a nerve. Charlie Kirk wasn't just a man. He was a symbol. And in today's fractured climate, symbols are either celebrated or destroyed. The line between disagreement and dehumanization has thinned to almost nothing. When empathy is replaced by tribal allegiance, tragedy becomes theater. Experts call it cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort people feel when their actions clash with their beliefs. Instead of facing that discomfort, many rewrite their motives after the fact. It's not lying, they say, it's self-preservation. Maybe that's what David did. Maybe he truly believed that cheering was a way to project strength. But even if that were true, it raises a painful question. What kind of society conditions a person to think that noise and bravado are the right answers to fear? When our first instinct in tragedy isn't compassion but defense, something fundamental has gone missing. As the debate spread, another question surfaced. Was David's chant an expression of freedom or an encouragement of harm? Free speech is one of the pillars of democracy, but moral responsibility doesn't end where legality begins. The law may protect speech, but it doesn't protect intent. So, when does a chant become complicity? If words can inflame panic, provoke violence, or deepen division, should they still be treated as harmless expressions? Legal experts admit the line is blurry. Courts judge intent, not emotion. But emotion can be just as destructive. In the eyes of the public, David's chant wasn't about patriotism. It was about disregard for human life. That's the problem. What's legal isn't always what's right. And as always, social media took over before the facts could. Within minutes of the first reports, the internet had already decided what happened, who was to blame, and what it meant. The clip of the cheering man, just a few seconds long, was reposted millions of times across every platform. No one waited for context. No one paused for confirmation. It didn't matter what had actually occurred in that chaotic room. What mattered was how people could interpret it to fit the story they already believed. The clip became a weapon, a spark thrown into the gasoline of a divided culture. Each political side seized it instantly. On one end, the footage was framed as proof of moral decay, a symbol of how far some people had fallen, celebrating violence rather than condemning it. On the other, it was spun as exaggeration or propaganda, another attempt to vilify innocent people for a misunderstanding. The lines blurred quickly, and the truth, the messy, human, complicated truth, was swallowed by noise. Every share, every caption, every hot take pushed the story further away from what actually happened. It became less about the event itself and more about how people could use it to validate their anger. Algorithms, designed to amplify engagement, turned outrage into oxygen. The more emotional a post was, the further it spread. The more divisive a comment sounded, the more it appeared on feeds. Anger became a form of currency, and platforms cashed in. The digital ecosystem doesn't reward calm explanation. It rewards reaction. Nuance doesn't trend, but fury does. And so, as millions debated the meaning of a man's cheer, very few were actually seeking answers. They were seeking confirmation, something to prove their side right and the other wrong. Soon, the shooting wasn't about justice. It wasn't about Charlie Kirk as a person, a husband, or a father. It became about winning an argument. People stopped referring to him as a victim and started referring to him as content. Headlines used his name not to honor his life, but to attract clicks. Hashtags replaced humanity. Pain became performance, and grief became a marketing tool. The more shocking the headline, the more profitable the tragedy. And somewhere in the endless echo of retweets and reactions, truth quietly disappeared. In that digital storm, reality itself began to blur. Online personalities and self-proclaimed investigators cut footage, spliced audio, and twisted statements to create narratives that aligned with their audience's expectations. For every person genuinely trying to understand what happened, there were 10 more exploiting the confusion. Some wanted attention. Others wanted influence. Many simply wanted views. That's the danger of virality. It rewards intensity, not accuracy. When emotion outweighs evidence, the loudest voices drown out the most honest ones. A tragic moment, like the one in that crowded hall, becomes entertainment faster than investigators can even issue a statement. Within hours, YouTube thumbnails with red arrows and flashing headlines appeared. TikTok creators reenacted the event for engagement. Commentators speculated about conspiracies. People who weren't there acted like eyewitnesses. And once that happened, the damage was done. Because once misinformation spreads, it's almost impossible to pull it back. The internet doesn't wait for facts, it manufactures them. And when truth becomes optional, justice becomes impossible. Behind all this chaos lies a deeper truth about our society. We have grown addicted to outrage. Outrage is easy. It requires no thought, no patience, no understanding. It gives people the illusion of moral superiority without the responsibility of empathy. In a world where scrolling replaces reflection, the fastest reaction wins. Outrage makes us feel alive in a world that increasingly feels numb. We've reached a point where compassion is seen as weakness, where admitting uncertainty is mocked, and where empathy is dismissed as naivety. People don't pause to process anymore. They react, share, and move on to the next controversy. Outrage has become a cycle, and each one leaves us a little more desensitized than before. The cheering man in the crowd wasn't just one individual reacting poorly. He was a reflection of us all. Of a society that confuses noise with strength, that celebrates dominance over understanding, and that treats real human pain as just another moment in the endless feed. Every share and like distances us from the humanity of what we're seeing. The cost of this cycle is enormous, because what begins as moral numbness ends as cultural decay. When tragedy becomes entertainment, empathy dies quietly in the background. Justice, once built on facts and fairness, becomes a popularity contest determined by whoever controls the narrative. The shooting of Charlie Kirk wasn't just a horrific act of violence. It was a mirror held up to a society losing its moral center. It showed how easily truth could be twisted, how quickly compassion could be drowned out, and how fragile our sense of decency has become in the digital age. The outrage didn't stop at the cheering man. People began attacking one another in the comments, accusing, labeling, and canceling. Instead of asking why something happened, the internet demanded to know who to blame. Friends argued. Families divided. Even media outlets chose sides instead of seeking truth. The tragedy that should have united people in grief only deepened their hostility. And that's the danger. When identity becomes more important than integrity, there's no room left for empathy. So maybe the real story isn't about David, the man who cheered. Maybe it's about what we've all become willing to accept. Because every time we treat someone's suffering as entertainment, every time we react before we reflect, we lose something vital: our humanity. When did we decide that empathy is optional? When did we stop believing that pain deserves respect, even if it doesn't fit our narrative? Each moment we dehumanize another person, we chip away at our own moral foundation. The internet gives everyone a voice, but it also tempts everyone to perform. We don't just share information. We perform our opinions. We perform outrage. We perform righteousness. Every post is curated for attention, not for understanding. It's no longer about communicating truth, but about winning the crowd. And when truth competes with spectacle, spectacle always wins. That's how misinformation thrives, not because people can't find facts, but because facts don't trend. To restore balance, we have to remember that behind every clip, every headline, every hashtag, there are real people, real lives affected, real pain that doesn't fade when the trending topic changes. The shooting of Charlie Kirk should have sparked a collective moment of reflection about violence, division, and compassion. Instead, it became a race for engagement, a digital battlefield of accusations. And yet, the responsibility doesn't rest solely on platforms or influencers. It rests on all of us. Because algorithms follow human behavior. If we reward outrage, the system will feed us more of it. The truth is that empathy isn't weakness. It's strength. It takes courage to pause before reacting, to think before sharing, to understand before judging. It's far easier to join the noise than to stand apart from it. But if we can't reclaim empathy, the cost will go beyond this tragedy. We'll become a society that values victory over virtue, spectacle over substance. And once that happens, justice cannot survive. Not in courts, not online, not anywhere. The story of Charlie Kirk's shooting is, at its core, a warning. It warns of what happens when emotion replaces evidence, when technology amplifies division, and when humans forget their shared humanity. It's not just a question of who fired a gun or who cheered afterward. It's a question of who we are becoming as a people. Are we still capable of compassion, or have we surrendered that to the algorithms? If we can't bring back the simple truth that every life deserves dignity, then no verdict, no confession, and no headline will heal what's been broken. Because the deeper wound isn't in one event, it's in us. The more we let outrage define us, the more we lose sight of what justice is supposed to mean. In the end, this isn't a battle between left and right, between media narratives or political teams. It's a battle between humanity and indifference. One side seeks understanding, healing, and truth. The other feeds on chaos, spectacle, and division. And every time we choose to scroll past suffering, to reduce human lives to digital content, we cast our vote for indifference. If we continue down this path, the next tragedy won't just divide us, it will define us. It will confirm that our moral compass is no longer guided by compassion, but by the pulse of a screen. And if that happens, no amount of justice will bring us back. Because the fight for truth doesn't begin in courtrooms or newsrooms. It begins in us. In the choice to care, to question, and to listen. It begins when we stop reacting and start understanding. Stay informed. Subscribe for continuing coverage and in-depth updates as this story unfolds.